Hey guys, it's Randy with Saturday Station Farm, and today we got 3 things to go over talking about rats. So first off, the number one reason why you have rats on the farm is because you have food available to the rats. Rats need about an ounce of food a day. That's a lot of food. Usually it's from feeding chickens or turkeys or pigs. There's some grain source of some sort that is usually being fed free choice, so the animals can eat it whenever they want, and then the rats are moving in and scooping up the rest. Or bird feeders. Bird feeders are really common too. Little birds and squirrels will knock stuff out, falls on the ground. Mice and rats come in. Super common. Number one, before you do anything at all, some habitat modification, however it needs to be done. Remove the food source and almost all the rat problems are gonna go away. One option, build a big wooden grain bin. Easy enough with a bunch of plywood. I put this one on casters. I don't have a top for it, so this is really a temporary storage for us. We could just build a wooden top for this, easy enough. I've got a link in one of the playlists that has this, me building like 4 of these. One option, secure storage. An old barrel works really well. An old barrel works perfect, right? Get a nice clasp on it. Food in there, it stays dry. Inside, we got our chicken feed in there. Rodents can't get in, it's secured. Or another option, if you happen to have a lot of feed, if you're getting a bunch of bulk grain, got a lot of pigs, a lot of chickens, that kind of stuff, meat birds for the year, an old chest freezer. You can find these things all the time. It's a huge volume. Usually has a pretty watertight seal. You can put a clasp on it so nothing can get inside there. You can leave them outside if you get them under overhead cover so that water doesn't make its way through. Number one, store all your grain in something that rats can't get into. Exclude them from the grain, from their food source. Number two, if you have lots of grain all over the ground, because you're free choice feeding your animals, stop. Limit feed them for a while, break that cycle so that the rats don't have an easy meal, they have to go somewhere else. So number two, something to think about, once you get your food kind of secured, you need to secure your building. Now, something like a hoop house, there's no way that I'm gonna rat-proof this building. But rats want their bedroom as close to their kitchen as possible. So again, if there's a consistent food source around, they're gonna try to make this their bedroom. If they've been laying in the hay in here and the straw and they've been making this their home because there's regular grains around, and then I eliminate all that grain and they have to start traveling across the farm, down to the beaver flowage, off to the neighbors, all of a sudden they no longer use this structure. But if you've got like a small physical chicken coop, making that completely tight so that rats can't get in there is a great way to still have your grains where they can consume them, free choice if you want, but now the structure is solid and they can't get in. Long-term solutions. I can already hear you now. Randy, I've got a setup where I can't stop feeding them, I can't eliminate waste, I can't secure my structure, whatever it is that's going on. Or I made a mistake, the bag fell over, rats showed up, we didn't know they'd been around. Now we have tons of them, we gotta get this population under control. Whatever the case is, there is a place for trapping and or baits, both of which are just tools, right? So I just want you to think about this for a minute. They're good tools, they're short-term tools. So the problem you have, just keep this in mind, if you go and use a poison bait, or you use a trap and you kill a rat, if the environment that attracted the rats in the first place is still there, you've just eliminated an individual, right? You've addressed a symptom, you haven't addressed the problem. Nuisance wildlife issues are symptoms of a problem, and the problem with rats and most wildlife is usually food and shelter. You eliminate those two, all that's left is sex. And we don't have a lot of issues on the farm typically with an overabundance of rats breeding everywhere. Usually the food and the shelter come first, and then the breeding happens, and then all of a sudden we've got an issue we need to deal with. And so there is a place definitely for trapping and poison baits. I'll do a whole other video on specific traps and baits. But I will say this, should you need them, specifically to Tim's question, and I actually get this a lot from people, most of the modern poison baits that are made now are not, like, the risk of secondary poisoning, like with owls or your cat eating the mouse that ate the poison bait, is massively low. And part of that is because the baits are not as strong as they used to be. There are several different mechanisms of action of how that poison will affect the body, whether that's hemorrhaging, neurological, calcification of the organs. There's a bunch of different ways that death can be doled out. So the baits themselves have been formulated specifically for that size animal, which really mice or rats. And part of the action is that that rat has to consume the bait, and then the metabolizing of that bait gets it into its system, and then it kills it. So for a cat or a dog or a human to come up and eat one of those poison baits, it's probably not going to kill you. It might make you super sick if you did it directly. But if a rat, if you have your baits in, if a rat has gone and eaten that bait and then died, well, through that process of eating that bait, it's actually metabolized a certain percentage already of that compound. So then by the time it's worked its way through its system, you have a dead rat. An owl, for example, eats that rat. There's just a trace amount, if any, of that compound, that poison bait, left in that rat. So the chances of secondary poisons are massively low. If it wasn't, we would have dead cats all over this country, everywhere, because there are millions and millions of pounds of poison baits used throughout the country. I mean, every single restaurant, every store you go into, you'll probably see those little black boxes where they have poison bait set up. All the dead mice and all the crazy populations of cats we have, you'd expect to be seeing just them dropping all over the place, and that's just not the case. So they are relatively safe to use. What I would recommend though is not to use them as your first choice. Stick with addressing those longer term issues, your food and your shelter. Because honestly, it's just gonna keep costing you in the future if you have to keep going out and screwing around. First you gotta go buy the baits, and you gotta go check them, then you gotta spend time checking traps, and then you get it taken care of, and then they come back. Just the mental bandwidth alone. You've got enough things to do on the farm than screwing around checking traps all the time for a stupid rat, when you could just modify the environment and make it an environment that rats don't really want to inhabit, that just will not support them. That's the long way to go. But should you go with poison baits, they can be effective. The biggest thing is you want to keep them contained in a child-proof box, because kids will eat crap and then you get sick. You want to make sure that they're secure so that rats aren't hauling them out from the box and putting them where they should be, where maybe your animals get into them, and it's unlikely they'd kill them, depend on the compound probably, but you don't need them getting sick, and you just don't need them just floating around willy-nilly in your environment. There's a time and a place for everything, right? So, all right, so just remember, take care of your food first, take care of any shelter issues, and then utilize traps and baiting as needed to get a population control. You may not even need them ever in the future. I mean, honestly, once you've kind of got those first two taken care of, you just don't need to spend money on baits. You don't need to spend your time screwing around, checking traps. They can work, but they're not really addressing the real problem, right? So that's how I kind of want to get you thinking with these long-term problems, right? So I will do another video, maybe a couple more, actually all on the traps that I use. Lethal traps, cage traps, poison baits, all that stuff. So I will do more if you guys want to see that and know more about it. I will go into depth more on it. But for the time being, there are a handful of options out there, but let's kind of address the fundamentals first, and then we'll build from there. So hey, if this is super helpful, share this with somebody who needs it. Odds are you probably know somebody who has a farm that has rats everywhere, and they could probably maybe need to hear that, hear some advice, use some advice that'll actually help them out. Make sure you share this with your buddies. Thanks guys, I'll see you next time. Some people think that having a cat is a good idea. But I mean, honestly, cats don't kill nearly as much mice and rats as you would think they would. They can do a decent deal, but usually what happens is they just alter the rodent's behavior. You still have mice and rats, they're just not as brazen. They're hiding inside the walls, they're hiding in places you never see them. Cats just exert a pressure on the population, and they modify their behavior in response. And they do kill some. Some cats are great mousers, but there are always more. We're not in short supply of rodents. They're gonna outlast us humans, right alongside the cockroaches. They're probably gonna last, who knows how, they're forever, So just keep that in mind.